Hello and welcome back to 1874. It's Monday. I'm Dan Bardell and I'm joined by my good friend Gregg Evans for a special podcast episode today. What we're going to do is Gregg's book is starting to reach people now. So Gregg's going to come on. He spoke about it a number of times on our weekly show anyway, but Gregg's going to come on and give us the scoop around his book, Waking the Giant. I'm trying to remember what it says off the top of my head, Gregg. I haven't got the picture in front of me. Is it like the untold story of Aston Villa's rise or something like that? I've got a picture here. Here we go.
Inside the Rebirth of
Inside the Rebirth of Aston Villa by Gregg Evans and Matt Maher. As I said, it's starting to reach people now. And Gregg, I'm absolutely buzzing to read this, to be fair. I'll read any kind of Villa books that are from a time that I've seen, and I'm reading one at the moment that I'm really, really enjoying. But I've got to say, having a friend who's an author, that's a proud moment, and especially for him to write a book about Villa as well.
Yeah, well, look, first and foremost, you should have two. You know, this is a book by myself and Matt.
That's true. But I don't know Matt that well, so that's not as exciting for me.
Yeah, look, the reason Matt isn't on is having some technical issues, which have just been ongoing for a little bit of time. But Matt will come on and talk about the book with me in much more detail at a slightly later date. So, yeah, look, the book is officially out on the 17th of July for most people, but some of the guys that ordered it early are now getting it delivered. So Monday morning, a bit of a surprise for some people who got it delivered out there. So yeah, look, I'm just going to talk a little bit through it, really. I mean, first of all, I really want to thank, obviously, all of the people that helped me put the book together. And I think the relationship that myself and Matt had built with people within the club, people that have left the club, some of the longer serving players at the club, really helped us put the book together and tell the full story of, how Villa have transformed themselves basically from a championship team to a Champions League team in the space of 7 years now. And the main idea behind the book was trying to explain the takeover, really, from Nassif Sawiris and Wes Edens in a bit more detail. Between us, I was working for the Birmingham Mail at the time, and Matt was working at the Express and Star and still is as the chief reporter there now, chief sports reporter. So we were the sort of two local reporters trying to get to the bottom of the takeover at the time, which obviously every Villa fan will remember came on the back of this chaotic period where the club nearly went into administration and was issued with a winding up order. So as part of the book, we had to try and tell the story of what happened leading up to the takeover, and we've gone into more detail than anyone has ever managed before, I think. And we actually managed to track down Tony Shaw, and we had an interview with him, and we got some of his thoughts. And in the book there is an exclusive extract in there as part of one of the chapters with some of Tony Shaw's thoughts and some incredible revelations, really, of
wow,
what's happened over the last 6 years. Because we haven't heard from him, have we? So this, that's just one of the exclusives that is in this book. People will soon be reading about that, and I'm sure there'll be many different thoughts and opinions on the back of that.
That's incredible. I mean, you've only just told me that now. Now, Dr. Tony used to be in the DMs every day, and I've not heard of him for years and years and years. That's incredible that you managed to track him down, Gregg. I mean, I'm going to give you your flowers now, because I think sometimes you get a bit of a raw deal with the Villa fans because you're not a Villa fan. So I think you can have an opinion on something sometimes, or actually deliver information sometimes that people maybe don't want to hear, and you'll get piled on a bit because you're not a Villa fan. Whereas I think if I came on and did exactly the same thing, it wouldn't be as probably would still be a pile-on, but it wouldn't be as bad because I'm a Villa fan. But I've obviously been mates with you and worked with you for a long, long time now, and I know how much information it's not always things that you can publish or run with on social media, but obviously me and you have a good relationship and you trust me and you tell me things every now and again. I know that stuff you haven't told previously to people that's absolutely fascinating, and I'm imagining that in the book some of that stuff is there and more detail around that stuff as well.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. Look, the same sort of principles apply as to writing a book as to reporting news and various things. Look, you have to make sure the facts are correct first and foremost. Give the right of replies to people or companies or clubs that you're writing about. So, we had to go through a long process of giving, all the rights of replies to various people. I think there's 330 pages, I think, and there's so much in there that I haven't reported previously. There will be a crossover of various things that we have because of just because of the nature of how football runs, and you've got to tell the story as well as bringing it to life. So the book starts with a look back at that sort of troublesome period under Tony Shah and what happened next. And then it builds from the takeover, which is the really exciting times. And look, there's been a lot that's happened since, and I'd love to get your thoughts, Dan, on your most sort of satisfied period as a Villa fan, or some of your best memories over the times that I've reported on, and myself that me and Matt have reported on in this book. But I'd like to get your thoughts on just what periods were the most exciting for you, because as a reporter, you crave a good story, an interesting story, and Villa have had loads of those. But the promotion winning year was probably the most exciting in some ways.
Yeah, I think that would literally be the first one that jumps out of me when I think of your book and the bits I'm looking forward to read. I know, like, the relationships you have with players and staff that were involved at that time, and myself the same, because when Villa are in the Championship, they're obviously a little bit more accessible, aren't they? Because they're not a Premier League team. It's easier to speak to people. You kind of yourself can just get more access around that time. So I had good relationships with people that were playing for the club and managing the club and things like that at that point. So from that time, that 10-game run was like a really exciting time for me, because you're speaking to people and you're getting a flavour of what's actually happening at the club and how it's going, and you start to think, wow, actually, we're going to do this. And I know I've heard stories from around the dressing room at that point in that 10-game run and getting promoted, and I've heard stuff from you, and I know you'll have stories that will be in the book as well. So probably that's the first bit that leaps out at me, because I just think it was an incredible time having a manager that was a Villa fan, having a captain that was a Villa fan, and was absolutely running things week in, week out in that 10-game run. And then just so many of those players that were playing them. I've got Connor's shirt from the Rotherham game behind me on this podcast for those that are watching via video. Like, the players were such a good bunch of players that, and they'd say it themselves, people like Tommy Elphick kind of said it, if maybe Villa hadn't been in the Championship, they'd have never got the chance to play for this wonderful club. And all the players that played in that era, I know how they feel about the club and how much that they love the club and the affection that they hold the fan base and the club in. So I think probably just that period, because although I hated being in the Championship, I just wanted to get out of it as soon as possible. It did feel like a slog at times. In the end, I think that period was well worth it because of the people that ended up being involved in the football club. And ultimately, I do think it helped get Villa back to where they are today, the fact that they did spend that time in the Championship.
Yeah, I think so. And look, Matt did a brilliant interview for the book with Dean Smith, and featured heavily across the book, which we knew he would be anyway. And he goes into real deep detail on how he joined the club, some of the issues that he faced, some of the really big moments that happened, because they continued into the Premier League. And I think for supporters that have probably known and heard a lot from Dean Smith already, some of the things that he says in the book will be just super interesting as well, because it's all fresh, it's all new, and I think because he had that relationship with myself and Matt, who he knew for much longer, and because we had the opportunity to write in much more length, he was able to share some real deeper stories that we haven't really gone into previously. Fascinating story about Tammy Abraham as well, and how things could have been slightly different.
Yeah, I think I know that one.
How things could have been slightly different on a number of occasions, actually. So, one before the playoff final, and also one a few months earlier as well. So, some good stories around that. And Dan, you're quoted in the book, aren't you? I think you're one of only a handful of supporters who made it into the book. Yeah,
you did ask me. You asked me something ages ago.
Haven't you?
I remember you asked me a question. You asked me for a quick voice note about something. I completely forget what it was. But you did ask me. What did you ask? Well, I won't spoil it, but I vaguely remember you asking me something, but I can't remember for the life of me what it was.
Yeah. It was probably the toughest. I would say the toughest match I've ever reported on as a Villa reporter.
Oh, I remember. I know.
You remember now.
It was the worst. One of the worst. It was one of the best footballing experiences of my life, but also one of the worst because I've never felt physically ill in a football match before. But I honestly, it was hot. Everyone will know we're talking about the West Brom playoff semi-final, the penalty shootout. I've never experienced a game where the stakes felt so high. Bearing in mind Villa have been in the Champions League this season, when I think about how I felt during that game, and if I'd have had an Apple Watch at that point, it would have told me my heart rate was through the roof and seek medical attention immediately. Like it was so hot in that away end. The atmosphere that the West Brom fans created that night was like made it really, really hostile. And Villa found that game difficult. It was such a pivotal game, and when it went to penalties, and to think if we lose this penalty shootout, we've got another year in the Championship. That honestly, that game was hideous. And I can't imagine what it was like for you.
It's difficult.
Some people might know what we're alluding to here. I don't know whether you want to talk about it here or just save it for people that are reading the book. But for you, difficult for very different reasons.
Let's just say I enjoyed writing the book, but going over that chapter brought back some tough memories at times. I think do you know what? I think after that season, it made my job a lot easier because Villa just didn't play West Brom again. And haven't. So it's it was the only game I used to go to as a Villa reporter, thinking, I hope Villa lose this. Every single time it was just like, please Albion, please win. That
game was vital.
It was tough. It was tough. And look, there'll be reporters across the country, across the world, that when it comes to watching their team, there's always a slightly different edge to it. So, but from a professional point of view, and I've always followed that. From my reporting, I've always tried to be professional. And the fact that I've written a book on Villa, and one of the key moments was beating West Brom in the semi-final. I mean, it was so difficult on the day, but looking back and just looking at the work from a professional point of view, I think that chapter's fascinating because there's a really heartfelt interview from Christian Purslow in there, the Villa's former CEO, who has spoken exclusively to us for the book, and he hasn't gone through his time at Aston Villa publicly. We've seen and heard from him in various bits, but to go over the entire period that he was working, he's another real plus for the books. I think there are details in there that you just wouldn't know without speaking to him. So, the interview that he did on the West Brom game, I found really, really fascinating. And then also the playoff final. There's a chapter on the final. So, for people who have followed my work previously, many will remember when I did an article on The Athletic about Villa's 10-game winning run in the Championship. Now, that was one of the Athletic's most viewed Villa stories ever. So it just shows that, the appetite for it. So I knew that we had to go into a lot more detail around that promotion season and give at least a chapter to the promotion, to the playoff final. And we did, and it's turned out great, and I thank all the players for helping me with it.
And then you've got obviously the Premier League period as well. So I imagine there's some stuff around lockdown and Villa just about staying up by the skin of their teeth. I'd imagine there's a chapter on that and Villa's Premier League journey. Since you must have spoken to like so many players or ex-players. Obviously, there's a couple that are still there and have been there throughout this journey, and that in itself, I think, is absolutely amazing that Tyrone Mings and John McGinn have seen the club through all those times. But you would have spoken to so many players. Just give out some of the kind of ex-players that you've spoken to around this book, players that obviously the fans who are listening and watching this will know and love.
Yeah, well, Tyrone was really kind to agree to do the forward to the book. So obviously the book is kicked off by him, just going through some of his memories. John McGinn gave us way more time than we expected. Really, really good, and went through lots of different stages in lots of detail. And what you have to remember is a lot of the interviews that we were doing was to cross-reference facts and check facts and make sure things were accurate.
Yeah.
Because it's all well and good one person telling you something, but then you have to make sure that that's accurate. So, we had to cross-reference a lot of things, and then try and get some new stuff to use. And John McGinn was brilliant. There's a chapter again with him later on in the book explaining, and I won't give too much away, because I think as soon as I start talking about this, people will know where it's going to go. But the things that he said are all exclusive to the book. He's never said it before, and it basically just hints at how close he was to leaving Villa and some of the reasons why. And I do think people reading that will be quite shocked to read why. And I'm still quite shocked to this day. And whenever I watch him now, I think, and people won't understand why I'm saying this until they've read the book, but I now think, what must he think of some people? That's all I can say. Okay. Yeah, because there were some people who were not quite into him.
Yeah, that's fair.
And yes, so you asked some of the players that I spoke to. So
I mean, that's big in itself. You said that, I remember you saying a few weeks ago on the pod actually about that John McGinn chapter. I do remember. Yeah. Remember you saying that. What he must have been through. And this is what people often have a go at me on here for. I don't really ever lay into players or anything, because I've got kind of an idea about, having known a few footballers, as to how it actually feels and what it's about, and that they are actually just normal people, and no one wants to go out there and play badly or miss a chance or score an own goal or whatever. It's just something I've never done. So that kind of that chapter, that's of great interest to me, to be fair, because I've just never really felt the need to really. I can criticise people, I'll do that, but really going hard on people, just not something I've ever wanted to do.
Yeah.
Except for one manager, perhaps, and there's probably a chapter on him in your book as well.
There is a chapter on Steven Gerrard in the book, and it does not go into the details of Dan Bardell at Craven Cottage on that fatal night for him.
No, I'll never forget receiving that text from you.
Anybody sitting around him would have seen it. So, but we'll move on from that.
Certain players' dads grassing me up.
So some of the other players that we spoke to, Ezri Konsa was very good with his time. Ollie Watkins as well. Two players that have been a real key to the journey and are still at the club. Albert Adoma was actually really good as well. Okay. Going into just going back to the playoff year, and just how it was quite difficult for him after the playoff final, which people can read. Conor Hourihane, very, very good. Jack Grealish went into some quite decent detail actually about why he moved to Manchester City and how hard it was for him to leave Aston Villa behind. There's a whole chapter dedicated to that, because it's such a big deal at the time, wasn't it? £100 million.
I think that's massive, to be fair, that you've got that, because I think certain fans will look at how he left and think that, people often say he didn't do a statement, he didn't go into any detail about Villa, it was all focused around Man City. So I think that's actually a really good thing that there's a chapter around that and him explaining, why he left and what Villa actually meant to him, because I think that's the side of it people haven't seen, in fairness. Yeah,
I think so. And I think just listening to some of his thoughts around the Great Escape, which is a great escape, and one of the real moments, in Premier League history in terms of clubs escaping. Tyrone specifically asked me and Matt if we could go into more detail on that, because he said that he thinks it's a story that is just so undertold and sort of underrated. So, look, if the former captain of the club saying that, then we decided to do that. So we did a chapter on that. I think it was the flavour and the feeling amongst the players after the Everton game and on the coach on the way home. So Anwar El Ghazi missed a real big chance and said to us in an interview for the book that he was just like so down after that game, and like he was reading about all the negative comments and stuff that were coming from the fans, and he felt like really personal, like it was him to blame that Villa were going down, because at that point pretty much the entire team thought that that the club were going down. You know, Matt Targett was like holding back the tears doing an interview. Ming said that that he was just like not losing faith, because he always maintained that they could still do it, but it was just running really low on confidence and belief. And even Jack said, you know, Jack just said, look, it was Jack Grealish. He said that he thought the club were down at that point. He just could not see a way back.
I remember speaking to Connor after that game on the coach on the way back on text, and we were like, yeah, it's going to be very, very tough to stay up now. That's a killer. That game's killed it. But obviously we all know that wasn't what happened, and they went on and did something absolutely incredible, those players. I think that's the thing throughout this period that you're covering. There's kind of so many like sliding doors moments where things could have gone in a very different way, and they didn't. But then all this bad, all this good, all these things that have happened over that 5-6 years, they have led Villa to being the beast that they are today under Unai Emery. So you look back at it and you wouldn't change any of it. But there's been some times where I've been like, it's tough being a Villa fan. I don't think I can take much more of this. But it is genuinely like the period that you're writing a book on here is an absolutely incredible period for the football club for so many reasons. And I think that's why I'm so excited to read it.
Yeah, and look, that's what gave us the inspiration to write it. You know, it wasn't a case of just in inverted commas, Villa getting into the Champions League. It was the case that there were so many stories within it. And like, because myself and Matt had been there on the ground as the reporters right from the Championship days, where there was only two or three of us in the press conference room, all the way through to Villa qualifying for Europe and then kicking on from there. You know, we just felt like we were really well placed to write it. And the publishing company that decided to give us the contract to write it, HarperCollins, felt the same as well. And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the sliding doors moments, because there were just so many. And you know, another one, we're going back to the playoff season, but it was, you know, the goalkeeper situation of the goalkeepers getting injured, and like Jed Steer, he revealed, again, another guy who did a lovely interview with us, reveals how close he was to joining another club on a permanent deal, but somehow hadn't signed the contract, and then Villa called him and he had to come back, and then, you know, Jed becomes this amazing hero for Villa. So that was a sliding doors moment.
There's loads.
You've got the whole the Hawkeye stuff with the Sheffield United game, how, you know, Neyland, how that should have been a goal, and Villa, you know, if Villa had not got the result in that game, they might have gone down. That perhaps was another moment. You know, there was and look, Christian Perslow, really grateful to him for going into detail on this when Villa were considering hiring Thierry Henry as manager, and then decided to get Dean Smith instead. You know, the whole process around that is explained in full detail. That was a sliding doors moment, because what might have happened had Henry taken over. You know, Jack Grealish, the owners deciding to keep Jack Grealish, and then look, as we go further through the years, you know, you look at I spoke to so many people off the record about this, because you have to have trust with you know, private conversations, and some people don't want to be quoted in the book because they want to keep their involvement in the club, you know, whether that's from an external or internal point, private. So again, I'm really, really thankful for all the people that spoke off the record to me and gave me some details around that. But if you just think to the key transfer window when Villa signed, you know, the number 9 and the goalkeeper for the future, basically, Emi Martinez and Ollie Watkins. And there was one other player in that year that was brilliant. Who was it? That they signed three: Cash, Martinez, Watkins,
Bertrand Traore.
Bertrand Traore was it? Yeah, I'm thinking there was and Barkley. Was it Barkley came in on loan? Yeah. From a recruitment point of view, as a relatively new Premier League club, to sign a goalkeeper and a number 9 who go on to score in a World Cup semi-final was Ollie, or European Championship? World Cup semi-final for Ollie.
Sorry, Euros.
Euros semi-final for Ollie and representing the country. Jesus, I've called players by their first name so many times. I'm sorry. I should be referencing them as surnames, but I'm not. Apologies. And then Martinez to go on and win the World Cup. You know, those signings were amazing. But there was one key moment where Emi Martinez might not have signed, or Villa might not have signed him. And that wasn't because they were tracking another goalkeeper, although Callum Wilson never signed for Villa.
Yeah.
Villa were looking at Callum Wilson, and the plan was to sign Wilson and Watkins. And if Villa had signed if Villa had signed Wilson, they wouldn't have gone for Martinez, and they would have rode it out for a little bit longer with Heaton, hoping that he came back from injury, and then also looked at like a stopgap for a short period of time. So, you know, that was another sliding doors moment, and there's just so many of them in the book. You know, there's just so many moments, and then, you know, as we go later into the more current times, there's the hiring of Steven Gerrard. We explain why that didn't quite go to plan, the process behind it, what might have changed, you know, had certain things happened. There were a couple of key players that Gerrard was trying to sign that I really don't think have been reported previously, and they could have been, you know, game-changing for him in many ways. We cover that in the book. And then the process of getting Unai Emery and the key moment that helped persuade Emery. You know, there's what, 5 or 6 chapters dedicated to Emery, and I think for Villa fans, with what they're really, you know, should be excited about is read this book, enjoy this book, and then look forward to Guillem Balaguer's book coming out in a couple of months. Because, you know, for Villa fans at the moment, they're going to have so much stuff to enjoy. So get through this book, enjoy all the previous years, and look forward to reading, which I'm sure I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure Guillem Balaguer's book will be packed full of loads of recent stuff about Emery that we
every day as well. Unbelievable times.
Every day now.
It's had the QR code up the whole way through this show. So if you've got your mobile device next to you and you want to buy the book, just scan the QR code, and that should take you to the place that you need to go to buy Gregg's book and Matt Maher's book. It's saying Gregg's book, Gregg and Matt Maher's book, Waking the Giant. I'm so pleased for you, and I'm so buzzing to read it as well. You've really whet my appetite on this show. I'm going to throw a few random names at you and see if they're mentioned, or two if you've spoken to those people. I'm going to throw some names out there.
And just remember that some of the names that you say, okay, I might have spoken to them privately, but obviously if I can't, it'll just be enough.
Just tell me if their name is mentioned in the book if you need to as well. Get Kalinic
mentioned,
because I've heard some great stories about that. I don't know whether it'll be into the detail in the book, but I've heard some unbelievable stories. James Chester.
Heavily mentioned, James. Chesy, very, very sorry not to mention you for the first 28 minutes of this podcast. But he was...
Tommy Elphick?
Mentioned.
Yeah, Tommy's an
amazing guy. An amazing guy. And I did a big interview with him for The Athletic, which was, again, another one of the most read articles at the time. But it was just before the period that really we were covering. So he didn't have too much to give us for the things we wanted to know, if that makes sense.
I've done a couple of pods with him, mate, storyteller. Did a great Mick McCarthy impression as well. Jedinak?
No, sadly not. No, mentioned, of course, but no interview with him. I think because he was, during the time he was at Tottenham, so it was quite difficult to get him.
Yeah, fair enough. Hudson?
Mentioned.
Elmer?
Heavily mentioned.
He's obviously got a new role at Villa now, hasn't he? He's heavily involved.
I'm not very good at giving this away. I mentioned or heavily mentioned. It kind of gives away the level of. I'm trying to think of
like a really obscure person, and I can't think of it about as obscure as he got with me coming up with Kalinic right at the start. So I can't.
Yotta did an interview with him.
Yotta thriving in the business world now, isn't he? Yotta.
Yeah,
absolutely fly. Wesley, isn't about Wesley in there, Big Wes?
Mentioned some interesting stuff that was mentioned. I suppose one guy who I haven't mentioned, and you've just reminded me now, is Suso. You know, Jesus Garcia Pitache. Another exclusive interview with him. Never spoken about his time at Villa with in public. Gone through
Excellent.
a lot, a lot, and had some pretty strong views as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and goes into detail at, like, some of the players that he pushed to sign didn't quite work. Some of the players he was trying to sign would have really helped Villa, but they just weren't able to get deals done for them. They're all mentioned. And yeah, he told an interesting story about his trip to Brazil, all within a day. How he flew out from Birmingham, London, can't remember, to Brazil, struck a deal to get Douglas Luiz to the club, flew back, and they got it all done within like 24 hours. The whole agreement, amazing story. And obviously, Douglas went on to be really, really important for Villa.
Yeah. Is the Danny Ings transfer in there?
It is.
Because that's when I think of you. That's one of the things that pops into my mind. The fact I get the blame for it somehow. Like I was so scared at that time. That's an unbelievable story. The way they signed Danny Ings, isn't it? That's incredible. That's worth buying the book just for that story. It's really buzzing to read this, and I'm really, really pleased for you and really proud of you and Matt. I don't really know Matt, so I can't. It's hard to be proud of someone that you know. But for you to have done this, I know like how hard you work. I know how hard you've worked covering Villa over the years. I know some of the stuff that you've known and that you haven't been able to report. I remember when you were the first person that said about PSR and everyone hammered you, but you were absolutely 1,000% correct with that. So I think this is a good chance for you to kind of get your credit and get your flowers that you've deserved over the years, Greg.
Yeah, thank you. It's on a personal note, really, really proud to get it done. But like, it sounds a bit of a cheesy way to end it, but like it wouldn't have been made possible without Villa's success in many respects, but without the help from the people that who have genuinely made the moments. Christian Perslow, the efforts that he put in during his time at the club to transform Villa, for the owners. Some of the things that he did to help with PSR that many people won't know is that Damien worked with and why he's been so good for the club. But look, the players have executed the job as well, haven't they? So yeah, the credit must go to them.
All right, mate, that's a nice way to end it. Thank you ever so much for doing that with me today. We've kind of jumped on and done it, but honestly, I found that really, really interesting. So I'm sure loads of people will find it interesting as well. Don't forget, buy the book. We'll stick the link in the description so that you're able to go and order Gregg's book, and hopefully it comes to you soon. And it needs to come to me in the next month, Greg, because I'm going on holiday and I want to read it on my holiday. That's the ambition. So I need one as soon as possible. But yeah, that's it. Do all the things that I bang on about every single week. Subscribe to the channel with your post notifications on. If you're listening via audio, 5-star reviews and leaving a nice comment or review is the order of the day. And only one thing left to say: up the Villa, Greg.